Welcome back. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what I know as an Edison connector. That's sort of a trade name. Its official name is a parallel blade U-ground. It has a NEMA designation, which is a National Electrical Standards, NEMA. It's called a parallel blade U-ground because the ground pin is actually bent into this U shape. Sometimes you'll find that they are round, but it has three conductors. It has a hot and a neutral and a ground. And the ground is in this U shape, and the hot and the neutral are vertical or parallel to one another in a standard household. This is a standard U.S. residential wall outlet. U.S. wall outlets are 120 volts at 15 amps. That's so important to just sort of have in your knowledge base. The U.S. power is 120 volts at 15 amps. Now this connector style comes in a couple of different configurations, and I gave this little NEMA chart over here. In older homes that may have, a big wall mount air conditioner, you may find a connector that looks similar to this, but that the pins are at different orientation, right? They may be perpendicular to one another. One is perpendicular, and these are for different power handling capacities. At 125 volts at 20 amps, it's got this little tong that sticks out, makes a little T shape. And at 250 volts, the pins turn sideways so that they are in line with one another. It's just a way that we can prevent plugging the wrong equipment into the wrong voltage. But this is the most common configuration. A residential wall outlet, 120 volts at 15 amps. This connector is not locking and is not waterproof, so you would not want to have this anywhere near water. And I'm sure that all of you have tripped on an extension cord at some point and unplugged whatever it is that you wanted to have plugged in. So it obviously is not locking. We're trying to get away from gender designations. And so we've gone back to the trade name for what it is. And this yellow image in the middle with the prongs that stick out is referred to as a plug, and the receptacle is a wall mount is a receptacle, but the receiver is known as a connector. So if it's on the end of a piece of wire, it's a connector. If it's in the wall, it's a receptacle. And if it plugs into either one of those and has the prongs protruding, then it's a plug, right? The receptacle and the connector are always, you should be assumed to be live. That's where the power is going to come from, and the plug connecting into them is going to receive power, right? So these pins that protrude are not energized. Let's look at our next slide, right? So polarized plug. There are a lot of devices that you'll find that only have two wires, maybe your toaster, your coffee maker, your hair dryer, but it's important that you get the correct wire connecting to the correct conductor, right? So we want to make sure that our hot wire always connects to our hot wire and the neutral always connects to the neutral, even if we don't have a ground. And you can see over here that a polarized plug, one side is wider and the other side is narrow. The narrow is always the hot. The longer or wider slot is always the neutral. And then the ground, we've already discussed, is this U-shaped opening at the bottom, right? And polarized plugs max out at 120 volts and 15 amps. You will never find greater carrying capacity than that. You may find lesser. And if you don't have a polarized plug, then it just doesn't matter. They'll both be small and they can be plugged in either way. Those are increasingly rare. Wiring of a pin connector or of a Edison connector, if you were to open it up, you'll see three connections for wire, and one of them will be brass, one is silver, and the other is green. So you can see that this plug has a silver blade, a brass blade, and then the U ground. And on the U ground, it's always, the screw is always green, and it's also 8-sided. So it has kind of an octagonal shape to it, and it has green paint on it. And that's how you can tell inside, even if the blades are not separate colors. But in this connector, they did it, right? And it's easy to tell the ground. The ground will always be the longest pin, right? We want the ground or the safety to make connection first, so that if there's problem with the equipment, when we plug it in, our safety has been connected before the equipment is energized, right? So a little catchphrase to remember how the wires go: if you put black to brass, you'll save your ass. The white wire goes to the silver, green wire goes to ground, to green. And that's Edison connectors, and we'll be back in a minute with IEC.